So, this is my talk. I'd rather have a backend guy write frontend than the other way around. Um, I already got told by somebody that they disagree with me yesterday, only after reading the title. So this is going to be a fun, and probably the question session is going to be fun too. So what I want to talk about is pains and gains in going from backend to frontend, because I experienced that and I learned along the way, did some wrong things. I will talk about things and trends mostly in the JavaScript community, because most of the people in frontend use JavaScript nowadays, I think. I will be talking about practices I found, some tools also, but this is most of the practices I'll be talking about are tools agnostic. You can use it with anything pretty much. So I will try to stress that you shouldn't be really religious about your tool. So this is me. I've done some front-end work in different environments. There was some web forms. I really don't recommend that. I think it's still alive somewhere on some projects. I've done some Razor. Then I did a couple of months project and more on Angularjs. Then I switched to React, and now I'm kind of back to Angularjs with some Node backend. So the main reason for this talk is that I got it all wrong in the beginning. So I just wanted to talk about this because there were some lessons and there were some really valuable experiences for me at least. So maybe not for you, but we will see. So it all started with a new project, as most of the stories start with. It was supposed to be a very easy project. There were some products. You get some users. You know, the products could change states. There was some business process involved. The products could have owners. The users did things with the products. This sounds like a pretty basic and pretty, like usual stuff. But for us, the new thing was SPA, which is a single page application. Nobody from my team had ever done that before, and on top of that, it was supposed to be material design, and so it was supposed to look slick. We didn't do any of the design; we outsourced it somewhere else because it would probably look crap if we did that. We only, implemented mockups. What was also cool about the project was that we could choose the tech stack. Nobody was pushing anything on us, so we thought we could use Angularjs because it was about the time when Angularjs was becoming popular and everybody was talking very good things about Angular. And also, it sounded like something right up our alley because there was the DI in Angularjs. It was kind of object oriented. There was a supposedly a cool architecture. So we boarded the hype train. Why not? And AngularJS was supposed to. We thought that AngularJS is gonna solve all our problems in the front end. So I thought, well, that's the front end done. So we can add some more things to the mix. So we thought that we could try and do domain-driven design. We had never done that either. We wanted to add some common query responsibility segregation. This is all, we thought, why not? We can learn on this project. I think most of the projects in IT start that way. The problem is that with AngularJS, one guy in the team did a tutorial. And with domain-driven design, we had somebody who read a book about it, which was quite a big book. So we thought, well, he must know something. And about the CQRS, we just heard it was cool, and it was used in domain-driven design, so why the heck not? So yeah, what could possibly go wrong, right? And surprisingly, from the business standpoint, the project was a success. I mean, for some reason, the client was satisfied. The material design that we didn't come up with, we just implemented, was looking good. It was looking nice. It was behaving like it was supposed to. It was just slick, and we were delivering increments almost on schedule. So there wasn't too much of a delay. I remember a couple times when we really had to push it and stay late in the office to deliver something, but it was nothing really extreme. So, we could just hop on the unicorn and go to another project because everything was fine. Yeah, but it wasn't all that, because that's only the business perspective, and from our developers' perspective, it was quite different, unfortunately. So in the backend side, we were making sure that the domain is modeled correctly, because that's what the domain-driven design is about. You're supposed to model your problem with the words and the processes that the business are using to try and make the code look like you were talking to your client. So we were really trying to do that. So yeah, we were trying to understand the business language as much as we could. We tried to really get into it and understand the processes. Yeah, we were separating the concerns in comment and queries, because that's the CQRS. It's basically, we had one place where we were just throwing commands to write something to the database to change the state, and the other highly isolated part where we were running queries. So it was okay. You knew what you had to do when you wanted to change state and to read state, so everything was fine. And we were building a good test suite, quite a good test suite, because obviously it wasn't all that great in the backend. It looks like we were doing fine, but there were some places in our code that nobody wanted to touch that much. So we tried to create a test harness that would tell us when things went wrong there. And yeah, we got some red lights when we didn't expect that. So the test harness was doing fine, and that was backend. It was quite nice. But the front end part dealt with totally different problems, because let me just go back. If you look at kind of the problems that we're dealing in the backend, they were all high up there in the abstraction tree. We were trying to make good code. We weren't struggling with the technology all that much, so it was fine. It was great. And in the front end, well, so first of all, we were new to Angularjs, so we didn't really know what's responsible for what in Angular. We were trying to feel our way around. We didn't know what code and what logic to put where. In the beginning, we didn't know how to even organize the code, because it's JavaScript, so you can put it pretty much anywhere and it's going to work. So we had to basically pick and choose at random a style guide from the internet and stick to that, so that we could read the code without basically tearing our hairs out. After some time, when the front end became quite big, we had state literally everywhere. Like the whole application was this big mess of state because of the binding help that we did ourselves. And we tried to make that easier for ourselves with events after some time, and that didn't really go well either, because events are very hard to debug, and if you kind of miss which events are going where or which events are created where, it's really hard to think about the application. And testability, we didn't really care about that because we wanted to get it done. And just a quick question: has anybody done anything like do any of the problems sound familiar to you? I'm gonna do that. Okay, I see a couple hands. I honestly was hoping that everybody would put their hands down, because that would mean there's a lot of great Angularjs applications out there. But somehow it's not the case. Anyway, that's quite a contrast from the front end to the back end in one project. It was like, remember that it was the same team that was doing the front end and back end. And in both of these areas, we were dealing with totally different problems. So, it got me thinking, and the first thing I came to was that, oh my god, we suck at programming. And it's not a very constructive conclusion, so I tried to think some more, obviously. And the first kind of problem on the surface was that we were new to AngularJS, right? This is the first excuse that you can do with thinking about that project. We were new to the technology. We didn't know what the hell we were doing with AngularJS, so obviously it's gonna go wrong. But as I said, it's kind of a surface level problem, because when you think about it more, what we did, when I thought about our experience, was we really were focusing on the tool and not what we were trying to do with it. yeah, basically, if you look at the front-end problems list, it was all regarding the Angular. There was nothing about solving the client's problem, solving, like modeling business processes in the front-end. There was nothing. We just wanted to find the Angular way to do things instead of just doing things using Angular. And yeah, and in the course of that, we completely ignored how we were doing things in the backend, because we had some good ways to do that in the backend, but we just completely didn't think about that when we were reasoning about our front-end code. For some reason, we just tunneled on the front end. And yeah, that was a wake-up call for me, because I wanted to go into front-end development, but the first kind of bigger experience with single-page application and with modern front-end was practically a disaster. So obviously, I wanted to try and find a better way to do it. I wanted to find and try. I wanted to try find a solution to my problem, to see what I was missing when I was doing front end, basically. And the sad thing was that sad, or maybe it was fortunate. I wasn't alone in the internet that was looking for a solution to that type of problem. So the other thing is that people smarter than me, they saw similar problems. There wasn't a uniform solution to those problems immediately, but I could see, Googling some problems, I could see that that people were thinking about it and were working out things, how to do things properly. And at some time, the floodgates were basically open to a great deal of new stuff in the front end that changed the way that I think about the front end now. There was a lot of new things, and I'm gonna just go through some of them. So, first of all, components in the front end basically became all the rage. Everybody was trying to do components, was trying to componentize the front end, because they all noticed that it's a big mess of JavaScript. So they wanted to isolate some parts, because this is what components are about: just building smaller things that communicate with each other and solve business problems that way. Oops. The next thing was, on that kind of wave of componentization, Facebook came up with React, which is basically a library that lets you do components in the front end, which makes it easy and makes it fast to build a componentized front end. So they came up with that. And next thing they came up with was Flux, which is just an architecture. It's not a library. It's not a it's not a framework or anything. It's just a pattern of managing your state and putting it into your application. So instead of having this is kind of a diagram of our application. To be honest, what we did in that project, it was basically a big pile of state and some responsibilities, which were scattered across the code base. And what I noticed, that with React and Flux, you could do something like this. You could do an application where state was isolated, it was one part of the problem, and then you could componentize other problems inside the application to reason about specific things and not the whole application all at once. What we had to do when we were doing events, when we were doing two-way binding, you just had to keep everything in mind to make sure that you are not breaking things up. And with this kind of componentized model of front-end, it's easy to isolate some parts and reason about them on its own. So, all about the component hype train. So I basically did that because front-end became all the rage about components. Like, really, there was hype about React and Flux, with some speed bumps in the beginning saying that Flux was basically MVC, but, well, it kind of was. But when you think about it, when you think about all the things that happened in the front end, then something struck me and kind of put me on a new level of understanding how I write code and how I solve business problems in front end. And so specifically with implementation in React, they let you isolate parts of logic, and they let you give them specific tasks and deal with only that. And that sounds like a single responsibility principle, right? This is something that I've been using on a regular basis when I was writing backend code, and it kind of slipped my mind when I was thinking about front end. And the next thing is that, you know, with components you build application from smaller parts, and they are supposed to talk to each other without really knowing about each other. So that's you're basically composing the front end, and this is composition, something that was really recommended in any object-oriented program in the backend. Next thing is that when you're using components, and you know they're supposed to have one single responsibility, one task, and when they need to do something outside of their kind of main focus, then you pass a function or whatever, or you pass an action to them, and let them not worry about the specific implementation details. And this is basically dependency inversion, something that, you know, is highly advised when you're writing good code. And I hadn't been thinking about that in front end. Also Flux, Flux deals with the problem of isolating state and trying to manage it in a clear way, and making reasoning about state in your application easier, and basically like more easier. Let's go with that. It's easier, and it's easier to think about the state in your application, because you know that when the state changes, it always changes in the state store, and then it gets propagated through the application. And if you want to change state, you basically throw out an action. This is two things that you need to know when you're using Flux architectural pattern. And this sounds eerily familiar to the CQRS, which, as it happens, was an inspiration when Facebook was coming up with Flux. So basically, they just took everything that we know about good code, what we came up with in backend development or in development in general, and then just applied it to front end. So really, that blew my mind, because previously I hadn't thought about it like that. So basically, what we did when we focused on the tool in Angularjs, we just forgot about all the things that I told you here, and we tried to do it the way that we thought, because we thought that frontend is different from backend. So we were trying to find a new way to do that, even though we were using the good practices in backend code. And an additional kind of perk of all this environment with React and components and all that is that this is not a framework. This is not a monolithic solution that you're supposed to take with everything, with 100%, and use it. So this allows you to, this is a set of like loose libraries and patterns and practices. So what this allows you to do is just to pick something that you like from all that environment and use it anywhere else. So you can use Flux architectural pattern regardless of the technology you're using. You can do that in AngularJS. You probably can do that in whatever, on Knockout or Ember or whatever, any application that you're doing. And this was like a fresh start for me, because I finally noticed that I can use the same practices and the same models of thinking to front end, and I tried to do that, and life of my front end code became easier. I could make it testable. I could reason about it like more freely, and my team, when we start to adopt these practices, like for the second time in our careers, we could work on the application easier and communicate with each other easier, because now we were using practices that we are all familiar with, instead of trying to find, maybe we can use service here, or I don't know, maybe the scope is binding is somehow wrong or whatever. So we were talking with practices that were already in our lives as software developers, but in front end. So that was cool. And you might think that with this, every problem in the front end is solved and we can just go home, right? Well, it's not so easy, because as it happens, JavaScript is a a really good language for beginners, and it's very easy to start making a mess. During this conference, I had a couple of talks how people try to learn JavaScript. You know, all of the code schools, code academies. I heard about Free Code Camp, and you know, this is a big problem in the community to try and teach JavaScript because. You know, with this multi-paradigm thing in JavaScript and all the little weird quirks of JavaScript, it's very easy to do things wrong from the beginning. Hell, we did things wrong in the beginning because we were using JavaScript and not something else, probably. So there are a couple of problems in JavaScript, and one of them is which is not a JavaScript problem really. It's a problem. It's more like a mindset problem. People are focusing on the tool, and jQuery was for the longest time considered the silver bullet of front-end development because you were using jQuery to do everything, and so people are still doing that. People are still focusing and treating tools as gospel. And funnily though, and luckily, the front-end community is just great. It's a very big community. People see these problems. There's a robust community of people trying to help you. Most of the technologies that we're using in front-end is open source, so you can just hop right in, even though most of the open source projects are quite hard to contribute to. But you can just go in and browse the source code and see how things are working. And with the V8 engine for JavaScript, the JavaScript is pretty much everywhere now. It's also in the backend, but let's not talk about that. So the community is just great for front-end developers. It's easy to get new people into software development in the front end with JavaScript because you can just start up your Chrome and you can start using JavaScript right off the bat. Right off the bat, yes. So just to sum things up, we are all software developers, and this is something that I've missed and my team missed when we first started our front-end projects, because we thought that front-end and back-end are completely separate areas, and you need to find a new, different way in the front end as opposed to the back end. We thought that we need to find a new, new solutions to the problems that we already had. Instead of that, we found new problems in the tools that we were using. We were focused on the tools, partly, of course, because we were inexperienced programmers at the time, and using good practices in all the code is now something very obvious to me, but it wasn't at the time. Yeah, so same mental models can work for different things, and this is something that is apparent even on the conference like this. You can see people using psychology, or you can see people using psychology and applying it to software development, and that works out. So having or trying to apply different mental models to different areas and different problems is, it really pays the bill. And learn from everybody and try to learn from everything, maybe from your bad experience as we did, and try to apply every single piece of advice that you get from everybody into your work, like on a daily basis. This is something that is really important, I think. And this is the most important thing, because I know that, because I talk a bit fast, so I think we will have quite some time for questions. So I expect to get roasted for saying that, React is the answer or whatever. It's not. What I wanted to tell you is that we shouldn't tunnel vision on the tool, because right now, when we have the good practices in the front end, we can just take any framework, any tool, and try and write good code. And this is something that I learned the hard way because I did it wrong. So this is my, I think, most important lesson that I got during my programming career that the tool is not gospel, and you should be thinking on your own and not with your tool. Especially now that good practices are like coming to Angular 2, because I think that the community just noticed that it's good to try and write good code even if the tool might not let you. And funnily enough, after I've done all this thinking about front-end development, I learned about, and this is really why my talk is it's the reason for my talk's title, is that I found a team of a couple of really, really experienced backend developers who had never touched frontend at all. And these guys had the best practices that I listed. They had them like knocked down so well, and it was just so natural for them to use, is that the code in Angular that they created was pretty much the best code that I've ever seen in Angularjs. Even though they were in the same situation that we were on the start of our project, but they didn't focus on the tool. They were trying to break it up. They were trying to use it their own way. They weren't Googling for answers like we did. They weren't trying to find how people do it. They just wanted to solve the problem, and they were using the tool instead of letting the tool use them. And this was also a very, very eye-opening thing for me. Thanks. Yeah, I guess we got some time for question, or maybe a bit too much time. Keep it coming. Yes.
Okay, sorry. Can we?
We have a microphone.
Would you rather have DBA writing backend code, or would you rather have backend developer writing SQL queries?
Yeah, of course. The question is, would I rather have a backend guy write SQL and deal with database, or the other way around, the database guy writing backend code? Yeah, of course, this is a tricky question because the database is something very specific. I think this is a tool on its own. Like I feel that database is so close to the hardware, and it's so specific that the practices don't really transfer, I think. So probably the database analyst or whatever, the database guru would need to learn a thing or two when he was transferring to backend. Does that answer your question? Cool, thank you. You right? Yes?
You told us about your history and your arguments about your topic, but you don't tell the other way. Why front-end developer are bad as a back-end developer?
Not necessarily, but so the question is why would a front-end developer be maybe not a good back-end developer, right? So it's just that I think that front-end is so easy to get started with. Maybe I didn't include it here, but the front end is so easy to get started with that you get people that are freelancers, that are like homeschooled, let's say, and they are used to running at a problem and trying to solve it and with Stack Overflow or whatever. There's a lot of people that started to solve programming problems only using the language, not thinking about composition, not thinking about how to write good code or whatever, because there's a lot of people writing front end just like, let's finish it and ship it and forget about it and go to another project. So they're not usually as battle tested in maintainability of the code. That's the tendency that I usually see.
But the same goes for the backend. Maybe you can remember your first project, and maybe it was in a web forms. It's easy to start, show something, and it works. But it can be horrible.
Yes, but I think usually even when you see interviews or something like that, if you go to an interview for a backend job, you're usually asked about all the solid or grasp or good practices. It's usually in the like interview process. But with frontend, like what I've noticed also going to interviews, they're looking for AngularJS developers, they're looking for Ember developers. They're not usually looking for developers. They're looking for people using tools, and this is like a self-reinforcing kind of situation where front-end developers are supposed to know the tool, and the back-end developers are supposed to write good code.
So it's more about the mindset of the recruiter than the people that we really need.
Not only the recruiter, I think, because the recruiters are not as isolated from the IT that we sometimes think, because the recruiter isn't it's not the last step of the recruitment process. You usually get the on-site interviews or whatever, and even there, people are still asking you specific questions about AngularJS, for instance, or a specific question about the language. And usually when you're applying for a front-end job, they don't ask you about how would you compose a front-end application. They just expect you to know AngularJS and think that you're gonna fit in the team. That's the tendency that I see. Maybe it's different in other countries, but I think especially in Poland, it's still a main mindset.
Do you think this is connected with the hype train?
Probably yes, because and maybe it's a problem also with like the recruiting process, because usually the people that recruit you, they just throw buzzwords on an ad and recruit on an ad and just expect to get right people. But then I think it's the responsibility of the actual team, of the actual developers that are hiring, to try to screen out people who maybe just read a tutorial overnight on AngularJS and try to get in.
Okay, then imagine that now you need to start up a new project with a front end. How you would decide if it should use React, Angular, or any other framework?
It's usually experience of the team members.
But in the team you had the few years ago, when you started and no one of yours knew these frameworks.
Yeah, so I can't really answer this because now I think differently from that time. But now
what kind of advice you can give us?
So what I am now looking for in technology when I'm using it is or choosing it is if it's the technology that makes it easy to make mistakes. Basically, like if there's a one main or maybe only one way to do a single page application in that technology, then I think it's good, because then it's easier to get the whole team on the same page. And with, for instance, AngularJS or Ember or whatever, then sometimes they let you do things differently, and there's no now it's better in Angular. I give it that. But if the tool is letting you like improvise too much, then a team who is not as experienced in it will probably not do it as well as they should.
So what kind of tool will be better? The one that allows you, maybe not allows, but make you write more because the convention don't give you the power that everything is done in place of you, or the tool that use convention, and if you put this file in this folder, then the view will understand this.
I didn't really understand your question, sorry. Could maybe...
Okay, Angular 2 need that you write some attributes, some components, some declaration, and so on. Is it better or worse? The tool that just you put class on this folder and view on the view folder, and everything's work. You don't need to write your bindings. Will it be better or worse?
Better, worse than what?
For new guys. So if you start,
Can I stop you there? Maybe if are there any other questions? That just a second. Is any hands up? Because we could take that. You know, we could take a after talk and just
Okay.
have a discussion about this.
okay, thanks.
Is there anybody else? I guess not. Then thank you for listening. Cheers.